Hello, hello, everybody, and welcome to. There was no audio. How is this always a problem? Moisir, moisir, moisir. How do you always make these mistakes? Okay, from the top. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Studio Remote, the Rose Hall Project, brought to you by Columbia University Libraries. My name is Moisir P. de Saperera. I'm the Research Data Librarian at Columbia University Libraries, and my audio is finally working appropriately. I apologize for any infelicities during the first 2 minutes of this stream. With me, of course, is the Digital Scholarship Librarian, Mr. Alex Hill. So let's bring you aboard. There we go.
That's right.
Excellent. Alex, welcome to this exciting new edition of our show. How are you doing? You said that you something had just happened interesting for you.
No, I was just having a discussion online with a young author, or I actually don't know if they're young, with an author who was having a hard time getting published in Digital Humanities, and I read his article and his disappointment in reviewer number 3, and we were just talking about. I was telling him like how I find these meta discussions about the age not very useful, but not in a bad way. It's just that I wish they were useful. I just can't find a way that they can help us improve our work, and I said that it doesn't mean that we have to be super specific, but I prefer some kind of meso level of like for example, I don't mind discussions about genre. So you and me, for example, have discussed, for example, visualizations here. Like I found.
Wait, hold on. Sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to ask if the disgruntled author was me, who can't get articles on Digital Humanities published.
Especially in DHQ, right?
Yes.
No, this was not you.
Okay.
The person, the disgruntled author, looks a scholar from Brazil, I think.
I mean, that there's a version of my life where that could be me. I was strongly encouraged to apply for jobs in Brazil by a Brazilian scholar when I was living in France.
Yeah. Good times. Ladies and gentlemen, Moisir submitted a proposal for a special issue that I'm co-editing with Rubika Rizam on DHQ, and his didn't make it. So now that he will remind me of this until the day that I die. I will be hearing about that.
I made the classic mistake of saying, oh, my buddy is co-editing. I can just submit a napkin with a ketchup stain on it as a proposal and he'll accept it.
It was a good proposal. But as I always held, although he kind of like changed his story a little bit later, that he was like Derrida coming to Johns Hopkins, invited to give a talk about structuralism, to invent the next chapter, post-structuralism. Like, what are you doing, Pickles? Go away. We're live on TV.
Piccolo, what's up? Piccolo.
Sorry, my apologies, people. Hold on.
¿Qué pasa, Piccolo? Yes. So, no, I was not the artist. Or the author. I was working on a different thing this morning or this afternoon that I may show in a little bit. But go on, Alex.
No, cool. That was it. I want to see this new thing. Is this from Coding with the Dead or is this something?
No. This is from. So I took an hour off of work. Yeah, I'll show you because it is a little bit related. There is a version where this is like a DHE type thing. So let me switch to my computer. as Alex knows, but the listeners don't, I have lots of tabs open all the time. Okay. So I volunteer at a gallery. This is their Squarespace website, but they started a new project, and this is the web page for that project. Oy, oy, oy. There we go. And this is all written in Ember and in D3. So it's using the same exact technologies that we are using in the Rose Hall project. So this is an online residency that's going to pair 10 European Union artists with 10 artists from New York. And we filmed the lottery and everything today, which will be going live next week, next Friday. So
Nice.
yeah, unmute.nyc. This is again a Ember and D3 jam. So D3 is handling the animation here.
For the font, not for the video. The back is just a video, right?
Yeah, it's just a video. Yeah, this is an SVG overlaid on top of the video. That's doing D3 transitions.
No, I was gonna say because the computing power to have the video itself be
BSVGs, yeah, that's a little bit much. That is definitely a little bit much.
There's a point at which minimal computing can go over the line and become impossible computing.
Right. Yeah. So so here's the about page that explains everything that's going on. There are a bunch of partners. It's a very very fancy thing. Undercurrent won a grant and is working with all of these various European Union muckety mucks. So someday we've got to be getting that cheese, Alex.
See.
So if you are from the European Union and you want to help us out, please do so.
All the Europeans, as Henry James used to say.
Yes. Okay. So that was, I wanted to get that off my chest because I may be a little bit more distracted than usual from that. And
Why don't we could just do 1 hour today, and then you can go back to that.
Oh no, that's all done actually for the day. I'm done. I just had to participate in the video, meet all the artists, etc., read some things, tell some jokes, drop some little plastic balls that I had because we had like a lottery, like a bingo. I dropped my balls.
Sounds about right.
and etc. And so like I had like the green screen up and lighting and all of this stuff. So it was very profesh. Nice. Okay. So I have my screen up and but I can switch back to you a little bit, Alex, if you want to sort of do the standard 30-second recap of the project.
Yeah, no, well, the project
and
itself,
and you were talking about genre also. So, and I think that's kind of a lead-in into here. So, sorry, I cut you off with the whole digital humanities thing and how you were talking about genre. So let's go back to that.
No, yeah, that was part of the discussion was like my preference. At least, you see, I don't find debates about, for example, any debates that coheres digital humanities, for example, as a field. Because even as a field, like a professional space of like where people can get in and out, like our corner of the wood is like so different than like, for example, my annual conference, the Caribbean Digital, is so different than the big DH conference. Or
it kind of sounds like you're saying DH isn't a monolith.
Yeah, like it has a lot of.
Did I just invent that?
No,
I know, I'm kidding.
Maybe. In any case, so it's hard to actually find useful discussions that talk about like whether you can be a part or not of that of sort of an imagined monolith, because it's like there is so much space for all kinds of things. And then the other kinds of discussions that I don't find that I have a hard time trying to learn from or improve from, which is what I look for in scholarship, right? How to learn to understand the world better, but also how to learn how to do my job better. Is discussions about method and theory. Like for example, like I have a working definition of method. I don't bother to have one about theory, and my working definition has served me well. But I feel like I don't need to debate it any further. For those who are curious, my working definition of method is anything that I can teach somebody else how to reproduce step by step that will produce similar results. It's a method. If it's not teachable, then it's not a method. It's just some unique sui generis thing that you did. And it has to be a result.
Wouldn't it be a little bit paradoxical to have a working theory of theory?
Yeah, but that's the kind of thing where it's like I have a hard time finding like how is that even like it doesn't help me understand anything about the world, and it doesn't help me do my job better. So it's like I'm sure there's a fascinating discussion that I'm sure a lot of people have had throughout the history of mankind. Is philosophy of philosophy? Can there be a philosophy of philosophy? Sure, but like what do I do with it? And it's not that I'm not excluding. First of all, I cannot exclude anybody from this an imagined monolith of the age, because I don't think anybody has the keys to that. But if you were to come at our conference where we talk about Caribbean digital humanities, for example, you would have to show me how that then connects to some of the existing concerns of that smaller community, right? And I think this is where I said I think a part of the discussion, my contribution was like, I think there's a sweet spot here that where people who are interested in these kind of discussions can meet people like me in a place of like shared conversation, which is like genres. Like I was super happy to talk about specific genres and methods within those genres. We have been talking about those here.
Sorry, when you mean genre, you mean the genres that make up methodologies.
Right, like for example,
not genres like the novel or the short story or something.
They are related because it's like the concept is related. It's like these ways of organizing the different types of products that we make, right? And we can make visualizations. We can make there are different genres of visualizations. There are maps. There are right now we're making a radial visualization. All of them share kind of like. There's still like visual language, right? There are group of conversations we can have about the big genre of visualization and its smaller subgenres, right? There are different kinds of maps, etc. And these I find enormously useful.
And it's sorry, I'm going to keep cutting you off because I know you like to go long. But in this way, genres are.
Listen to you. You're the one who goes long.
No, but in this way, genres are like, I always found my dissertation advisor's definition very useful. They talk about genre as a contract between the creator and the reader or the viewer. So in this way, something like a map fits the genre because it relies on certain assumptions that we allegedly hold in common, and that can be problematic because the problem that happens there is when you move from this contract between the creator and the viewer to universalizing and thinking that a web map is universally legible, or a map on the web, or a map on the web is universally how we can present geographic information.
Right. And you know, and discussions about where the differences and similarities so for example, say if we're going to have a methodological conversation, which things can be said of all maps and which things can be said of only this kind of map, are these kind of conversations I think are important. Or for example, even if we were talking about epistemology, which this conversation hinged around epistemology, this article this person wrote, it was like, what things are kept out and are included. What are the rules for what gets kept in and kept out in this kind of map over that other kind of map? And what kind of rules about what's kept in and kept out can be applied to all maps? But this is where, if you try to do that with like the age as a concept, it's almost impossible to find that similarity. It could be done with maps. And it would be still hard to find kind of like a sort of very general epistemologies that apply to all maps, right?
I can tell you ahead of time, it doesn't exist.
Right.
We have a fantasy.
But it probably doesn't, right?
No, this is Edney's point about the cartographic ideal that you and I have talked about, not in front of cameras, which is like we rely on this fantasy that there's an ideal of cartography, and that sets up tons of problems. Yeah, but it sets up problems both for like scientistic positivists, but also for like post-structural whatever critiques of cartography also accidentally just reformulate that ideal of cartography. Like getting out of that is really tricky, but we'll talk about that at some other point. I do want to quickly inject that Ashley and Kay are participating in the chat. Ashley said that method is a set of teachable and reproducible tools for getting results, and said, "Preach, Alex."
Oh, she likes it. I knew she would agree with that. And we can teach them. We teach them all the time to get a specific kind of result and a specific job. But anyways, that's what we're doing here. We're teaching people how to do this kind of thing and think about it when they're doing them.
Right. And Kay asked a question. I think we sort of answered their question. Would you say a genre tells us about how to approach and understand a text or visualization? And I think that's like legibility is always important, and it's always it's very much, especially how we talk about the web and how we talk about online, is very much tied in with what sorts of assumptions are we making ahead of time about how users experience things, and this comes up with accessibility, etc. So and it
becomes a lingua franca. So a genre for me, so I don't have any kind of fancy definition of genre. A genre is just when things, like a large number of projects start having similar components and then become recognizable as this kind of thing. That for me is a genre.
Yeah.
So it's mostly like you have to wait. There's no pre-genre definition. You have to wait until it coagulates for you to recognize it as that's a thing. That's good. So for example, these Omeka sites, WAG sites that are super popular in Libraryland now, and that we now call digital. Still, the name hasn't coalesced because some people call them digital archives, some people call them digital exhibit, etc. That's a genre that's coalescing. The same part, like browsing, searching, an item page, these kind of things that you can start predicting them, but they become a sort of language that then we all share in making differences and kind of doing creative things around that. But anyways, yeah.
No, I mean, Ashley added that the generic contract is created intersubjectively, and I think that's kind of also part of this, because it's this very much.
Can we bring in Kay and Ashley into the conversation today, or is that not possible yet?
I mean, they're chatting in the chat. I think that's like. No.
Are they amenable to joining us on camera? They're regular.
I think we may have to figure that out at some other point, because that will introduce technical. I don't think we can do this sort of thing on the fly, just because it introduces the possibility of technical difficulties. Let's
figure that out this week, in the coming week, to see if this fits. Because remember, we had that idea that in the beginning it would be possible to come from the chat, the video.
Right.
And that would be.
Right.
I really want to figure out how to do that, because for our other shows, I want that possibility.
Yeah. I mean, like, obviously, we can just stream the Zoom window to Twitch, like we've done that before. Just within my super picky whatever. It doesn't work. Yes, my way, my generic contracts are not intersubjective. They are fiat.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said.
But but so there are a couple of things that I wanted to get to is that you're right in the sense that genres emerge from, like the Wittgensteinian like family resemblances, where although online, like, there's no such thing as a family resemblance for Omeka. Omeka is Omeka. Like if Omeka is the back end, but that's also a little bit of how much of digital scholarship or digital humanistic practice, et cetera, relies on the specific technologies of Omeka. And Wax, of course, is not Omeka, but performs similar functions. So they start, these two technologies and other technologies start inhabiting this kind of genre of the digital archive / digital exhibition. And yeah, so I think that that's true.
Content DM is another one that is used a lot, and libraries, and there are many. It's just that Omeka did become like the most popular one. But I wouldn't make the argument that they are platform centric. But it's one of those things like in Dominican Republic we call a razor a gilet, and that's not because the Gillette company is the only one that makes razors. It's just that.
Yeah, I mean,
kind of one.
Well, no, but it is useful to sort of be able to predict ahead of time, I'm just saying that like the Wittgenstein comparison doesn't really work because, that would be like if games were only understood as things that are played with a deck of cards, So you can't really talk about this kind of family resemblances type thing when you have a necessary condition, which is a deck of cards. So we can't say, oh, it's an Omeka site and it doesn't use Omeka, even with like your example, like where we talk about Xerox or Kleenex or dumpsters or something like that, So.
Well, Kleenex is a good one. Kleenex, I didn't know Dumpster was a brand.
Yep.
Kleenex is a good one.
Kleenex, Xerox, Dumpster, Google.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I actually
before we move away from genre into like actually continuing our deep dive into our specific genre, I wanted to point out there's also a sort of component of genre thinking that affects labor and organization at our institutions. So for example, here at Columbia, I've advocated that at the library we should, thinking in terms of genre, actually avoids a lot of the confusion around trying to develop programs for digital humanities or digital scholarship. I think those try to be too general and then don't allow us to develop best practices, or actually best practice is not the best way to say this. It's not the best practice for language. It doesn't allow us to develop sensible programs, workflows, etc. to do the kind of things we could be like. Some things would be detrimental to say yes to, but others no. And it depends. Like I think our genre thinking, if we actually had a robust genre thinking within our organization, we could, for example, be doing a lot more things in certain domains that we would lump in other domains that we probably don't want to be doing things.
Yeah, don't say best practices. I'm going to have to start censoring your Taylorist tendencies.
No, I know that. I took it back.
Right.
I took it back. But I don't believe in best practices as a concept the way that it's used in modern institutions.
But there's one last little thing that so this is rolling the tape all the way back. When you were talking about how your Caribbean Digital Conference looks a whole lot different than the big Digital Humanities Conference, right? And I think that this goes. I think that you also already hinted at this when you were talking about method versus theory, because I remember 8 years ago or whatever, like all these discussions on DH about how DH is about hacking and is about the tools and like hacking in the sense of doing things, building things, et cetera, et cetera. And this was presented as kind of like an ancillary approach that can unify different kinds of disciplines with a certain methodology in common. So like, something like an Omeka page becomes something that a historian, a scholar of literature, an art historian, etc., they can sort of share in common. And this has been critiqued because what that then suggests is that this is like the new appropriate way of doing scholarship, and this is what will get money, et cetera, et cetera. That argument is old hat. You and I are very familiar with that one. But when you were talking about the Caribbean Digital Conference, what that reminds me is that these sorts of projects that we're doing here as librarians, because as librarians we're like hypothetically generalists in some sense. So what we do is we try to not universalize, but we approach a discipline or whatever within its already existing genres. So that's what I was building towards. So there are certain kind of generic modes of expression that are unique to Caribbean studies, and that can be something as specific as publishing in a specific journal, right? Like that's we can think of that as a type of academic output that is unique to Caribbean studies. And so when we come in as librarians with our sort of like generalist hats or whatever, then what we're doing is we're being sensitive to those specific genres. And that is, I think, the ultimate reason why we can't talk about these sorts of things as a monolith or anything like that. Like, I mean, obviously, again, this is at least a decade-old discussion, right? But I've never really seen it from that other side, that it's through these kinds of methods that we provide an opportunity to link, not universalize, but link different modes of inquiry. And I think that's pretty cool. Kay asked another question. Can you talk about a program you want to do that you can't because we don't think about our work in terms of genre? Kay, can you describe what you mean by program a little bit better? Because I'm not.
I know what you mean. The for example, and I got a very a specific example of something that we're working towards and that we're probably going to be able to implement. There's been confusion there's been conflation, not confusion. Conflation of things that count as publication. And there's been conflation of things that count as digital collections. There's the DLC, that is where the digital collections, it's literally called the digital library, digital collections. And those are participate of the genre where you have, browse, search, etc. As you're familiar with this. And there's a side of the house that is the publication side with AC, right? And
Academic Commons.
Academic Commons.
The Columbia Institutional Repository.
And that's right, because I'm not only talking to Kay, who knows what these things stand for. I'm talking to everybody. And that's the repository, more or less like 99%, not 100%, to the chagrin of some, overlaps with the same function as DLC. But it's but the genre there that is explored is an academic publication or article, and some great literature now, and some other derivatives, but not the collection of primary sources that the DLC represents, right? This kind of thinking is not thinking about genre robustly in what I'm saying. It's making it leaves stuff like, for example, that we want to do, that you would do with Omeka in a no man's land. It makes it hard to actually convince that this shouldn't be part of one or the other. Not that these two are already divided by genre, but that the thinking around genre is not robust enough to actually create more genres that would allow us to understand something that you would do with Wax and Omeka as a different kind of thing. The difference there would be simple, at least the way that I understand it. The sort of stuff that you do with Omeka or Wax, etc., is different than a digital collection, mostly because it introduces an element of narrative. Or centralizes or centers the element of narrative, of scholarly narrative in a way that the digital collection doesn't. So you could think of it as a spectrum in which the genre of the digital collection actually emphasizes discoverability, sustainability, and all these other abilities that make it all kind of very homogeneous. In order for us to be able to achieve that discoverability and that sustainability, etc., we have to create a very homogeneous environment that can scale, that can be at scale. These Omeka little sites, even though they share the browsing and the searching and this kind of stuff, they are not emphasizing discoverability. They're emphasizing the story around a particular sub-collection in which form and content want to be married a little closer than what is possible for homogeneity, therefore creating a new genre, which that's why people call it the digital exhibit as opposed to the digital collection, right? And we're still negotiating the terms, but the distinction between the two objects becomes clearer. Well, we can call it subgenres, I guess, of a digital library if you want to go to organize it. But this is why I'm saying that it's not that we're not thinking in terms of genre, it's that we're not thinking subtly enough. We're not breaking down into different components. And therefore, for that reason, is that we have been saying no to a lot. In the past, we had said no a lot to a lot of those projects. We were scared of them. For many, it gets more complicated when you go into institutional histories, but in general terms that are useful to people outside of Colombia, I think this applies across the profession and across the libraries. Monsieur, I've talked enough.
No, so back to Omeka, because Badiha and I are currently working with a faculty member and their graduate student on a project, and we had, we've discussed how they wanted the project. Like they came to me and said, hey, can we, we heard that you can make websites with GitHub. Can you make a website with GitHub for us or something along those lines? And I was like, maybe this isn't exactly what you want. But the long and short of it is that we've all decided that Omeka is appropriate. And this is the first time I've used Omeka in years. And I've never really used it. Like I installed it back when I was on the market the first time. I installed it to see what it was about, because I understood that Omeka could conceivably play a role in whatever future job I would get hired for. And I was very much confused by Omeka at first because, and I'm getting to this distinction that you were hinting at, that Kay describes as archiving versus curation, because when you start up a new Omeka project, you're just dumped into this back end that's like, okay, start adding items. And I'm like, what? What is this? What do you mean items? I don't have any items. I'm just a dude in a studio apartment in Paris who wants to get a job. Yeah. And so this is. So when I was presenting this to the faculty member, with Madiha, we had to discuss ahead of time how we had to approach how we would present Omeka, and understanding that it requires this kind of this epistemological sort of grounding in this kind of ontology of the fact that Omeka relies at its core on a collection, on an archive. And every collection has its Dublin core metadata, it has other metadata, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And to the point where, like I was explaining to the faculty member, that collection can include people, and it's all these different sorts of things. And then you're like, well, how does that turn into a website? That just sounds like a card catalog with people in it. And then the answer is, so this is, and the answer is the exhibition side of things. So that's where Omeka starts to shine with tools like Neatline, et cetera, that actually allow you to take your archive and to build stories out of it that incorporate timelines or incorporate, all this sort of stuff. And that's, then once we get to that, I'm like, oh yeah, I know this. This part I know. I've been I've been trained in thinking narratologically, etc. So I'm very familiar with the idea of thinking in terms of an exhibition, or in terms of curation, in terms of picking an archive for a specific research goal. But it doesn't change the fact that initially you're looking at this and you're like, Oh, this is for librarians. Like this is
Right.
a lot of metadata and a lot of tagging, etc. So go ahead.
But the genre is interesting because it's a new genre that I would separate from our digital library collections, even though it's a spectrum, not a clear division. Because there's curation that goes into the DLC. There's a lot of curation that goes into the DLC by curators who have to pick what goes into there. It's not everything. We didn't willy-nilly put everything in there. And there is elements of narrative. But what I am saying is that something like a digital collection does not center the narrative.
Yeah, it doesn't present it.
It doesn't, yes, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
They're both between the lines and in some prose paragraphs, in some prose pages that accompany. Sometimes you will find like the equivalent of an Omeka exhibit in some of the DLC in the form of prose, sometimes multimedia prose with like an image representing the collection, but it's just not the center. The focus of the digital collection is discoverability across many of the items in many of the collections. And the focus though of these other ones, even though it still has the digital collection part too, that it shares with it, the focus is on the narrative. And this is where the genre has become clear to most scholars. And this is why it's also a genre that pushes on the question of labor, because it's a genre that is both being explored by, if you look at the actual people empirically who are doing Omeka sites, you will find them. Some teams are in the faculty without library help. Some teams are in the library without faculty help. And most of the cases have collaborations between the two. So it is this genre that labor-wise is actually at the intersection of library labor and faculty labor and students, which is interesting because the digital collection does not have, for the most part, faculty labor or student labor. Sometimes it does, interns and stuff like that, but it is solidly a library genre. It is solidly like, this is how librarians do things. We're going to use some robust metadata, international standards, and this kind of stuff. Dublin Core is kind of like anything goes. Dublin Core is kind of like, wee, you know? So this is why like Omeka is like a little bit more flexible, because if you actually had to convince faculty to do MARC records, you wouldn't get an Omeka site ever done, ever. But anyways, I digress. It's not only about this kind of like, I advocate for robustness in thinking about genre when it comes to maps too, and when it comes to like, there are many types of maps, like the one that me and Moacir are doing, visualization that are doing. Sorry, we're not doing a map right now. But anyways, we work a lot on interactive web mapping, but those have to be understood separately than the kind of work you can do in ArcGIS, even though there are things in common. And the fact that some of these things are not understood as separate necessarily by the larger community sometimes presents labor issues for us. But so I advocate for this kind of like a more robust conversation about the different types of objects we produce in terms of genre in order for us to clarify our labor a little bit more and what's possible and what's not, and what we should be saying yes to or not, which is where the programmatic part comes in. Should we have a program where we allow faculty to ask for an Omeka site? That depends a lot on what conversations we're going to have about what the objects will produce.
When you say that, do you mean because we do?
We do now. Omeka's new as a product that we offer.
That we like support.
Yeah, that we support. That's what I mean by a program, right? Like a service. Anyways, it's new. Took a while, but anyways, I think there are more things that we could be offering. It will take time, and we'll get them. We'll get there. And I think it will be as if I am correct, it will be a result of our getting better at having these kinds of conversations about what are these things and which one of these things have become this lingua franca. Which one of these things now are recognizable objects that other people and other universities are doing more or less the same.
Aren't you worried when you're using terminology like lingua franca that you're gesturing towards a universalization, or is the point that it's a kind of like a pigeon amalgamation of what these kinds of genres grab from all the various disciplines that make up something like digital humanities or digital scholarship? Or
yeah, no, for me it's more of an assemblage. For me, lingua francas are not things that I prescribe. I'm just describing realities that allow us to talk to each other. And as you know, most of our work in the past, or at least a big chunk of our work, is genre bending. So we take existing genres, like what we did with Torn Apart, combine essays with the periodicity of, like a journal with visualization. right? And we did it consciously while we were doing it. We were combining genres, and 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 that genre bending is possible only in as much as we can communicate what we're doing because of these coagulations, right? Because of the fact that some of these things have become kind of like common. We could be wilding out here, but there is a point at which we fail to communicate to others what it is exactly that we're doing.
And it relies also on a kind of legibility.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So when you go to an avant-garde jazz show and you walk away saying, well, the pianist was just pounding on the piano all the time, like I can do that. Well, no, because the pianist is building on a tradition, and that includes stuff that doesn't appear like just banging on the keyboard.
Yeah. The problem is when the lingua franca becomes imperial, right? When it becomes demand,
when it becomes English.
Yeah, when it becomes the English language, when it demands that you do it this way. So this is part of the problem we're trying to fight. If you have this way of doing things, this is why we're against best practices. It's the concept. If you have one way of doing things, then you're not allowing for new genres to be born. You're not allowing for new explorations and stuff like that. Now, it is important for people like me and Moacir and us in this conversation to understand that we want to both understand the existing genres, but also at least, for those who have the room to do it, explore a little bit the possibilities for new ways of doing things, which means that we have to deviate from best practices. We have to deviate from the monopoly of one genre over others. Anyways. No monopolies. As long as there's like the one digital collection, everything in the library that wants to be like a primary source should go here. Like what? 1 million items. I get it. All books go in a stack, but there's stuff that we need to put in special collections and stuff that has to go downstairs to the scientists. Anyways, go ahead, Moacir. I talked about
it. So. Dublin Core touched a nerve. Ashley wants to point out that she hates Dublin Core.
It's a little it's flexible. You got to give it to it. And it's kind of entry level, super easy for like faculty who never thought about becoming a librarian, for them to think about. It's not hard to explain like title author because it's similar to the kind of information they already put in citations.
Right.
So.
And then Kay added that Dublin Core is literally taught in the oral history program, which I think really fits what you're saying too.
Yeah. I got to get water, but this is where I wish that Ashley or Kay would come in and become like co-hosts.
Well, okay. All right. Well, you can go get water. And in the meantime, I'll take you off screen a little bit and move to the programming side of things, because we had our chit chat and our discussion. Additionally, I do want to say that the kinds of things that we're talking about here, Twitch deletes everything after 2 weeks unless we pay or something. Then the videos can exist forever. And we do record our streams. We're a little bit not great at uploading them to YouTube. We used to do it automatically, but now because of the way that the captioning is being generated, it feels like there's a desire for some hypothetical person to clean up the captions and then upload them to YouTube, but that's not really happening. But Twitch does allow for highlights to be made. So I've started clipping the videos a little bit, like looking for moments that I found to be, a little bit spicy, that can give a sense of the sort of work that we're working on. So this is a more general announcement that at twitch.tv/CULSTUDIO, there are things called highlights that are like 5-minute, 3-minute clips from both Rose Hall Project and from Coding with the Dead. The Rose Hall Project ones are a little bit more engaging because it's this kind of back and forth as opposed to just me being like. So anyway. So the the funny thing about the genre of the visualization is that what we are doing in the Rose Hall project is effectively, in many ways, saying, you know what, forget it. We're not interested. We're not interested in how you typically show these kinds of things. We're not interested in, you know, your philosophies of. Oops, that's the wrong window. Of what web pages should look like and how we should talk about people, etc., etc. We've got our own darn thing, and that's that. So let me bring up where we last were. It's going to take its time. But because of the genesis of this website came from Professor Naylor, from Professor Celia Naylor, who already had a kind of imagination of what the visualization would look like. And the thing of it is that visualization doesn't look like anything I've ever built before. Like, it's not a bar graph, it's not a pie chart. I mean, it has certain visual resonances with something like a pie chart, but pie charts are designed in a way so that, how big can I make this before, there it disappeared. Pie charts are designed in a way where the active distinction is the width, the angular width of the pie piece. Whereas in this visualization, Jeremiah referred to this as a Batman Joker visualization last week, which I think fits while we have the gradient wrong. Here, the angular width of the wedge means nothing. I mean, it represents a specific person, like, so obviously it means something like that, but it means nothing in the sense that it doesn't give a measurable distinction. All of the wedges are the same width, so that's why this absolutely isn't a pie chart. The information that is currently presented in here, or the active information, the coloring will eventually be semantically meaningful. Currently, it's just, or as Kay describes it, a space-themed tie-dye, which I think is also correct. Batman Joker spaces. You know who else also had this color scheme?
No, Canada Dry. I hope you're coming up with something else, because those were the colors, that green and yellow.
No, the Constructicons.
Oh, that's right. Wow, you remember your childhood a lot more than I remember mine.
Yeah, I was the Autobot in the family, and my brother was the Decepticon in the family, so he was the one that had the Constructicons.
I couldn't even remember the name of Bumblebee the other day.
I don't know what to say.
Yeah, no, I failed. I failed at childhood.
But this
I just don't remember.
This should be evidence for Kay that I'm not 35. So, because
it's out about the.
Yeah, secrets out. Secrets out, everybody.
I think the audience should know that in my house, me and Wazir are called the ma'am, the middle-aged men. I did not baptize us as such.
Kay is indicating their generational difference by comparing to Buzz Lightyear, who also has a purple and green.
Oh yeah, that same color scheme. I wonder if they use the same color palette because it's popular.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's also the Joker color scheme. I'm sure we can think of many examples. They're not complementary colors, so I don't know what prompts that, but maybe they have.
The color on Google Images later. I've done it. It's quite a fascinating exercise.
Okay. So yeah, so Buzz Lightyear also used that. The Constructicons, K, are they're a subgroup in the Decepticons among the Transformers. There are 5 of them. They are all construction vehicles, so which was a change because Decepticons typically were either like household items. That's really messed up to say that like a handgun is a household item, but household items like handguns or boom boxes and aircraft. but the Constructicons were construction vehicles, and what they would do is they could unite and form this giant robot called Devastator. And Devastator would like, that was when the Autobots really had to rally to defeat Devastator.
I am so happy that we've reached this new lower point on Rose Hall where we're talking about the Transformers. I always keep thinking that we will never go lower. This is that ideal variety show in the sky when every theme in humanity is open for discussion.
Yes, Ashley says like Voltron, and it's also like the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, because I watched the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers every day my first year of university, like in the sense that it was on TV and I had the TV on and my eyes were on it. But I don't want to say like I was like, Power Rangers is on. But every single Power Rangers episode works the exact same way. The bad guy sends a Zor to Earth, and they fight with the Power Rangers, and then the bad guy zaps the Zor and it becomes huge, and then the Power Rangers have to unite and form a giant thing to help defeat the Zor. Every single episode. Talk about no genre bending. It was astonishing. It's like clockwork. It's like what's that show? Law and Order. Where you can like set your clock by it. It's like, oh, here's where James Orbach is going to say something funny, or whatever. Anyway. So yes, Voltron, Decepticon, or Constructicons, Buzz Lightyear, Joker, Batman are what we have here. So the semantic information is carried in the actual radius of, or the difference in the two radii that indicate the upper edge of the wedge and the lower edge of the wedge. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe what semantically the length of each wedge is doing here? The radial length?
So the length itself is a period of time in which we can place that person in the plantation. And the possibility is only from 12 to
1817.
1818, excuse me. 1818 to 34, right?
33, I think.
33.
Yeah.
So that's like if it's full length, that means that person was there the whole time, that whole period. So the other thing that you want to do with the color.
Dalton, for example, and this is fake data. Dalton. So currently, this is only showing people who were born in or around 1817 or later. So Dalton left Rose Hall in 1832. So 1817 to 1832. So that's why Dalton's wedge is this full length. It doesn't go all the way to the center for reasons that we've described in the past, but okay, go on.
No, and then what we want to do with color, which is not happening because of Voltron here, is that
Devastator.
Right. So what's not happening right now is that what we want to see happen here is that we have color mean age, signify age for us. And the idea is that we would get a gradient in which like I think that I can never remember whether darker means younger and lighter means older. But we will have like we will have like an actual color bar that will tell you exactly what age a particular gradient in this range means. So that was it lighter, younger, and which one was it? I don't remember. In any case, that would be the idea. The idea would be what either of those two possibilities ends up being. Then on one side of the spectrum, we have a particular age, and on the other, another age, so that we can see not only whether that person was there all the time, but also what age they were there while they were there. And that once we attune our eyes to that meaning, that then we can grasp the whole picture, which is the point of the visualization, of most visualizations, to be a sort of macroscope. At least one of the points, because this one is going to try to do other things because of the nature of interactivity itself. that allows you to then have other effects than the sort of like one-off macroscopic effect. Macroscope here being used as the opposite of a microscope, in which instead of looking into tiny little thing, we just want to get the big picture.
So you chose a different color scheme last time.
Yeah.
And so it's different than the one. This is the old version of the project. So we had this color scheme. And again, this is just showing people who were born
So
in
darker was younger.
1817.
So
Darker,
was,
yes, darker is younger. So the idea is that this person here was born in 1817. And so yellow means that they were 14 years old. So if it gets to yellow, it means they were 14. So you have this extremely long, this large data set of people being born or arrive, but people being 0 years old in the archive. And then when cut short, it's because their lives were cut short, most likely.
But this is wrong. As we talked about, this is still not accurate in the sense that a lot of these wedges should not be blue in the torsion, because
the color scale
data,
is 0 to 14, and in the real data it'll be like 0 to 70 something or 0 to 80
correct.
something or something. Yeah,
and so we will even have a lot of wedges that are not even beginning at 0. There will be wedges that will be like, using this particular scheme that you're showing, for example, there will be wedges that will begin at green and end in yellow.
Correct.
Because that would be the age at which they're there in that period of time.
Correct.
So it would look a little different than this, but I think you can get the idea of what it is that we're trying to accomplish at the macroscopic scale here before interactivity kicks in.
Correct. Okay, so so let's go back to actually it's break time, I think.
All right, yes, I'm gonna make myself a little espresso shot.
Okay, so we will be back in 10 minutes, and I will set the back in thingy, and see you in 10. Kay had to boogie, so thanks for coming, Kay, and yeah, we'll be back in 10. Alex, we're back.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well. I'm my camera is wedging into your face.
What do you mean?
So like look at the screen and you see that your head is somewhat occluded by, yeah. There you go. Much better. Um all right. Sorry. My break was not really a break. Uh
I
there
heard that you left your mic on.
Oh, yes, you heard. The stream did not hear.
I heard it.
You heard it all. We
I
what's that?
feel your pain.
No, my pain is fine. I'm always correct. I did everything appropriately. Um, it's yeah. Well, I'm a little bit embarrassed, so like but not really like there's not a lot I hide from you, Alex. So it's all good.
All good.
Okay, so let's go back to the visualization that we've got here right now. So, would you like to describe, Alex, for us um, why why this looks wrong?
Well, right now it's not meaning anything.
Right. So we want it to get back to being something like this, right?
Right.
Where the wedge begins a certain color and ends a different color, where it's semantically meaningful to the person's age that's being represented or described. I'm not sure what the right language is to use around that sort of thing. Something like described feels a little bit better than represented, because there's something a little bit off-putting about saying that this is a representation of a person. I don't know. So what's the problem here? Can you describe it technically?
We need to figure out how to create each wedge, the gradient within each wedge to behave independently from the others. Right now, all it's doing is painting every wedge exactly with the same grade. So right now we need the
Oh, no,
balance.
no, no. Sorry. That will be the case. We haven't done that yet. The problem is
The
that
technical problem right now is that D3 and Ember need to communicate in order for us to be able to do this in a way that it's not really straightforward.
yeah, I think this is bad pedagogy when I'm asking you a question where not only do I already know the answer, but I'm waiting for the answer.
I'm learning. I'm learning to behave. And pretending
So
like I am like the student in some kind of pedagogical fantasy you have about like asking questions.
well, it's not a fantasy; it's reality. And so we have the community tree component here. So we're creating these. So we have this radial gradient here, and that's the white gradient that causes what happens in the center of the visualization. So we can skip that, and then we have this part here where for each person we create a gradient unique to them. Okay, and as you can see, like all of the values here, the colors, et cetera, are all the same. They're actually not different. At There are two variables here, beginning stop and ending stop, but the positioning, this is all the same. So the problem is that we're doing radial gradients. So let's change this to a linear gradient. I think that's the right thing to do. Nope. Okay. SVG linear gradient. Linear gradient. Did I spell it wrong? Oh, maybe it doesn't like it because I didn't close it. Okay, so now it likes it. So now if we go and look, we have a different, that actually looks really cool. I mean, it's not meaningful in any way, but I now as we can see, it starts purple on the left and gets green, and it's reproduced here. So the sense of the alignment around the center is completely missing, because all of these wedges start at their leftmost extreme, they start purple, and at their rightmost extreme they're green.
Right now it needs to radiate. The gradient needs to radiate from the center, not from the left.
Right. So so now let's look at the rules.
In other words, it still does not communicate age.
Oh yeah, I mean it won't for a little bit. So if we go to the instructions, or if we go to the Mozilla docs, MDN web docs, the Mozilla Developer Network documentation, whatever, we see that a linear gradient, okay, has an ID that we know. And okay, so you can have this gradient transform, rotate 90 degrees. So do you think rotating 90 degrees will be sufficient? Yes, no? I mean, isn't the problem here that, you know, we want this to go from purple to green, so that would be a 90-degree rotation, right? Yes? Alex? Why no?
Not participating in the Platonic exercise. And no, and no, what I'm learning is not something I already knew. No, 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 no. You and Plato, and I mean Socrates, can go have your little parlor game at the park by yourselves.
Just, you know, I'm just trying to give this some kind of narrative. So this wedge looks right.
Yes, the answer is yes. Go ahead, keep going.
What? I
Yes.
thought you weren't. Yes, what?
Fine, so that we can. You said so we can give narrative, and then you convinced me that I should just respond to keep. So for the narrative, go ahead.
So rotating it 90 degrees worked here, assuming that green means young and purple means old.
But then it messed up everything at the actual baseline.
So this means
It worked at vertically, it just messed up horizontally now. So rotating is not going to be the answer. I just don't think you can rotate this in anywhere unless you create quadrants and rotate it differently for like divide everything into quarters and rotate every quarter differently. It's not going to work.
So yet the wedges rotate.
Yes. But what you are actually, what you're rotating in the wedges is different than what you're rotating here. In fact, what you need to do is stop rotating and create just one common point of origin for everything, aka the center of the circle.
So you think there should just be a gradient, so it should be a radial gradient again? But when we made it a radial gradient, it showed up here. Well, let's give it a try.
It should be a radial gradient in which each wedge is going to start from scratch from the center. Later on, we'll add some subtraction, some arithmetic to move to sort of align the center for each wedge differently. No. Why the hell would the ones on the, why is it doing this, yo? This is not expected behavior. This is not expected behavior. Can we find out what's going on at an individual wedge? Let me look at the math. I can already figure out what the math is, but that is happening, but it's not expected behavior.
So we have this path, and it has a URL P113 gradient.
Yeah, I'm more interested in the actual numbers and the color values.
Okay. So let's look at what these variables are again.
Why do you have the home screen with kind of the dry bold?
Dude, it's an ad. Brave needs money somehow. I don't know.
Uh,
The CX defines the x-coordinate at the of the end circle of the radial gradient. The end circle, start and end. So so we have 50, 50, 50, 50 here. So let's change it to end is the end. So let's change that to 100. Let's change that to 100. Oops. Let's change this to 0 and change this to 0.
let's see it. Nope. Mm. Interesting.
Not really. So
Figure it out.
yeah, I know the answer already. Oh wait, this is linear gradient. Let's change it back to a radial gradient. I mean, it's still not going to work, I don't think, but oh, that's not good.
Just broke the whole thing.
All right, let's go back to where we were earlier. Okay, and now let's make these changes here. This is the end. This is the end. This is the radius, which will be the full length, so 100. This is the beginning, and this is the beginning, the focus.
Still wrong.
Yeah, this isn't even close. So, let's just put this here. Let's go here. And let's change the radial to linear. And now let's see what we get. Okay, so we get back to this problem. So, all right, so I'm going to tell you that the answer is not a radial gradient. I initially thought it would be because of what you were describing. I thought I could define a gradient that exists within the context of the chart as a whole, and that there's like a little mask, a little clipping mask that is what the wedge is. But that,
No,
what's that?
apparently not.
It 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 doesn't really work that way. The better way to do it. So if we rotate this,
Well, right now the problem is that it's casting. Say if the light part is just one light source, which is it looks like the light source is just in one place here right now. What we need is each wedge to have its own light source, if that makes sense.
so if we do rotate 270.
Seems legit.
Seems very purple. Okay. So this first wedge, and Ashley mentioned this, that the one wedge does look right. This wedge is close to correct in the sense that it starts as one color and ends as another color, and like, but as you notice, they all go from dark down to light, right? So this isn't going to be the solution. This can't be right. So what we need is we need the rotation to map to change for every wedge to give that sense of radiality, right? So how do we do that? Well, like
We have to calculate the number of wedges there are, and then we have to divide that by, divide 360 by that.
right, not 360. You have to use radians, but it's the same idea, right? Go ahead.
What was radians? 240. What is radian?
2/pi.
2/pi. But anyway, same idea. Yeah.
So in the
Wouldn't we use 360 if we want? Can't this work in degrees if we wanted to? No, we can't choose our units. No, that was curiosity. That's not if it says it that it likes one way of doing it, we just do it that way.
Well, so it wants the angle in radians because so what you see here is you have this, the I is the ith element of the array ID of the data, and so it multiplies it by 2 and then multiplies that by pi, because the radian is 2 pi all the way around. So for the first one, we want the angle to be 0. So the ID of the array index of the first one is 0. So 0 times 2 times math.pi is 0. And then we divide by the total amount of like
wedges.
You said, the total number of wedges, correct, like you said. So sorry about that. And
my proportions it looks very even. So that
correct. So I'll just copy that and then I'll paste that in here. So let's comment this out because otherwise it'll break things. And then we can get the index by adding this I here. So let's just actually even call it index, because when we iterate over the each, we can get two things here. Is that right?
I will never ever accept this way of looping that Ember invented.
What?
It's just weird to me. The syntax, not the actual action, just the syntax.
Okay.
Isn't it weird? I guess it's not you because you come from JavaScript land, so to you it's not weird.
I have a funny feeling there's something wrong here.
There often is. This is the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I made a syntax error. Each model as item index. Each data as person index. See, this works. Love it. Love it. You maniacs. The problem was the comma. Okay, so now we're
Still not doing the same.
yeah. It's but this line was crashing because I had person comma index, where it's supposed to be just person and index. I think that could be a Rubyism. I think in Ruby you would do something like
Yeah.
do
would.
as whatever. You would have a comma there. Okay, so we want to rotate this by some angle. So let's oops. Let's get this math back up here. So we want to do some multiplication and some division. Oh boy, you're going to love this.
Man. Whee!
Okay. We're going to do this a better way. We're not going to do this in the template. We're going to do it in the component. So let's just come all the way down here to the bottom, and let's create a new method.
It's really funny, this intersection between that which you can do in the component and that which you can do in the template. I think because Ember allows you to actually do some like rudimentary code stuff, tricks you into wanting to do things there.
Right. The current idiomatic Ember tries to have as much as possible done in the template.
Is it because it's faster to generate the site that way? Or?
I don't have a good answer to that. I just know that that's, like when you generate a new component. So it used to be the case up until about a year and a half ago. When you generated a new component, it would automatically generate a class, a JavaScript class for that component as well. Whereas now, if you generate a component, it just generates the template. And I mean, there are template-less components, and there are components that are just a template, like that don't require any kind of JavaScript involved. We have a new visitor. The lock says if you don't have a class, it is slightly optimized. So there you go. So that's the answer. If there isn't a
so it does go a little faster.
Yeah, it does go a little bit faster. So unfortunately, getting it to get us the number here into the template is going to be pretty complicated, and I'm not sure that I can do something like access math.py.
But at this point, that's just what I'm saying. So at the scale, at the type of project that we're building, this kind of decision, I would just choose the more robust language that is JavaScript, like it for these kind of calculations, because why try to be dramatic? And if we like, our data is not big data, right? And our site is not that big, and we're only going to generate it once. The last time we generated is not that far off. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to be constantly generated. There's no continuous integration. So these kind of concerns, I think that one should rightly have if you're building like an industrial strength app, are not for us. So that I would actually lean always to building things in the components, because because JavaScript is just all that much more powerful. At least it has a lot more libraries and more stuff you can do, and that you can do quickly because it's something we're more familiar with anyway. So anyways, that would be my where I would lean towards. But I don't want to get into philosophical debates, which I imagine exist a lot in the Ember community about what goes where. But
Yeah, I mean, this is, as with any type of framework, it'll be opinionated, but you can also do more or less whatever you want. So I think that the syntax is right. Let's see if something happens correctly or not.
to me, it's funny because
Looks like no.
something like Jekyll doesn't allow you
Uh-huh.
to have this kind of flexibility between like choosing whether to work within the framework or to work in outside files that then communicate with the framework. Like the communication between anything we might do with JavaScript or Python or whatever and Liquid is minimal. It privileges pre-production and post-production, but not in production, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I speak as the reason why I'm using this as a point of comparison is because most of the stuff that I do using Jekyll. For those who are watching and wondering, why is Alex talking about Jekyll? So Ember is supposed to do completely different things.
Yeah, so this is thanks Deluxe for being here, because this is a new kind of syntaxy type thing that I'm not completely familiar with. I would in the past you would do this as just as an action or something along those lines. But yeah, this kind of calculating this on the fly is something that's tricky. So FN is for currying argument. So that's when you have where you have a function that then has another function as a parameter, or the return is like a function. This is the sort of stuff that pushes at the edge of my own abilities. So the lock suggests making a helper. That's obviously a possibility. So we can do that. So yeah, actually, let's do that. So the parameters, it's expecting an index and length. Well, whatever. I mean, you can call this whatever we want. And then it returns index times 2 times math pi divided by length.
Mm-hmm.
And presumably we could change this around to make sure, like to do like corrections, etc. Oh, it has to be destructured. Thanks. Okay. And then here we go back to the, did I close it? Yep. We go back to here. Oops.
What's a helper in Ember?
Oh, so that's a good question. Sorry. So anything that
in a way different than a component. Sorry, go ahead.
No. So a helper is a function that generates some kind of value inside a template. I mean, like they can work inside classes too, but the way I think about, like you can write a helper that also works inside the JavaScript, like you said, but typically I think of them as something that you use within the template, within the handlebars. So each, for example, is a helper. So if I do like
that's a built-in helper.
Is a built-in, yes, correct.
So right now what you're doing is you can actually make your own helpers.
Correct. Yeah, you can generate your own helper without any difficulty, and like I just did. So now, what did I call it? Rotation angle. So that will be now available here. Oops, this is broken. So now, instead of this, because this refers to the component class.
The component class, yes.
So instead of this, we can do instead. Let's see if we get lucky. Nope, probably doesn't like the comma. Okay, well, this looks good. There's no red. So now let's see what we got here.
You might need to.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. This is still not working, but it seems to be working at least for that quadrant.
Right? No, it absolutely is not working. So let's look at what we're getting here. So
it looks like it's working for half of it. Is what I'm saying.
No, it's always purple to green, left to right. So it's not rotating at all.
Okay, yeah.
So, you know why?
Isn't that a pretty sunset?
Sorry.
I'm on to you, Buster.
All right, let me hold on. So the reason why is because rotate is expecting an answer in degrees, and we're giving an answer in radians. So the amount of rotation that's being done here is sorry, my leg just kicked in. No, it's a cramp. So there is actually probably variability here, but it's between 0 and 2, like something like that, or 0 and 6.28, right? So that's teeny tiny. So
go back to the helper and let's transform over there. Let's do the degrees to gradients over there.
Yeah, except I was planning on using this helper when we draw the wedges also.
Okay.
So I'm trying to not repeat myself.
Okay, hold on. Let's think about it then. Then at some point you're gonna have to double down somewhere. You either double down. You're gonna have to double down because the thing is that you either create two translation things, or you create two helpers. I mean, it's either you take the data, you translate the data when it comes in here, or you create two helpers. There's no other third choice here. So, I mean, creating two helpers is not bad. The degree one and the radian one. So you can go like arc radian and arc degree.
I don't know. How did I get here? I want start angle. Boy.
Boy is right. I need to charge my computer.
Wow, so SVG is inconsistent. So the start angle and end angle have to be in radians, but gradient transform rotate, maybe that's because this is like a CSS thing instead. I mean, I don't know. This is way more than I expected today. But okay, so this requires, so the easy answer is, how do we convert radians to degrees? And I was going to sit and think it out in my head, but I don't feel like it. That's not what I want.
1 radian equals 180 degrees
divided by pi. But this is radians times 180 over pi equals degrees.
I'm 100% convinced that somebody already even wrote that in good old JavaScript somewhere. that would be eminently findable on Google, so that one doesn't even have to think about it.
Yeah.
Sorry, audience. I just like to copy and paste code. Like I like to pen it up.
All right. So index times 360 divided by this data length. Now what am I doing wrong? Rotate 0, rotate.
This is the part that I got where I say it's 4:45, and there is a chance that we might not solve this in 15 minutes. The crunch is on, but if we do solve it in 15 minutes, that's what we live for.
Oh, of course this isn't working because this is the old I wrote a helper. This is inside the component.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Everybody,
it's Friday. Cut us some slack. We're you know, we're just hanging out. All right, so now we get 0 and we get 8.8. This looks a whole lot more like what we want. So what do we get here? Not exactly what we want, but at least it's changing, you know.
Wait, but why did it do that? Hold on a second. Aren't you missing pi here? Go back to the formula that you wrote it.
So let's look at the biggest gradient. See what it's doing here. I feel like it's the rotate is the problem. I think I'm doing something wrong with the rotate.
Can we read the documentation again for that?
I think that the documentation I want to read is to look at how I did it last time.
Okay, yes. This could have been done, I just want to point out, 40 minutes ago. It's not like we get paid by the hour. Well, we're not Taylor. We're not Taylorites. We're here for the pleasure, as theorists in the 90s used to say.
Okay, so. Oh
wow, you did it in increments of 10%.
No. That's because of the color thing. You'll see. Oops. So we had an X1 and a Y1. Okay, is that X1? Oh, nope. What? What? Why is X1 and X2 0%? Is that true everywhere? Yes. Okay. Let's worry about this later because, like you said, we have a small number of minutes remaining. Closer.
Closer.
Maybe I didn't need all this nonsense to begin with? Oh. No, not there, not there. Tuk, 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 tuk. Okay, so there's no rotation going on here.
There's some going on there.
Aha!
Transform class rotate 0.
That's the problem. Okay, so to describe it, how much time? We have 10 minutes. Okay, so we'll finish this. So to describe the problem, the issue is that the code is actually a little bit different. So let's man, I am annoyed that I'm going to be looking at the way we did this last time, but in the interest of moving a little bit forward and you know going back in time and asking previous selves how we did certain things is not so terribly different from going to
How with like normal work looks like, it's absolutely normal, man. We
yeah,
always go back to copy and paste from ourselves from a year ago.
right.
What?
Self citation, etc. So the difference here is if we go to the components and then what do we have here? We have it's not very helpful. I don't even want to look at this because this is gonna. Okay, so we had the visualizations as separate things, but we have. Yeah, no, I don't want to look at this because the way we're doing it now is much better. But we can see that the thing of it here is that there's a transform applied at the group level. The rotation is done at the group level here, not at the so likely there's an arc that gets drawn here. So let's search. So it has a start angle and okay, all right. So the way we have it now to describe it, the way we have it now is that each time it draws one of the wedges, it also rotates it, right? So as a result, the start angle so this is the old code. The start angle is always is constantly being changed because it's doing math to figure that out. Whereas in the old version of the code, the start angle is always 0 and the end angle is always 2 times math over pi divided by the data length, which is, you know, the width of one in radians, the angular width of one wedge, right? And then afterwards, it's transformed with there's a rotation transform applied to it. So as a result, the gradient is perfectly aligned with the wedge as it's standing at 12 o'clock. And then as a whole, it's rotated. So in the new code, what we're doing is so in the new code, what we're doing is the arc isn't drawn here. It's drawn in the other component. The start angle and end angle are being calculated on the fly. Excuse me. So again, this is incorrect. The start angle should just be 0. And the end angle is just 2 times pi divided by the data length, right? Okay. So now what we get is we get all the wedges on top of each other.
Right. So now let's spread them out again.
Yeah, so now let's rotate them. So if we go back to the component, we see that there's a group here, and then there is a opportunity here to do transform equals rotate
0.
And then, well, something.
The value of the function.
Yeah, this rotation angle. Yeah. And now what we can do is we can derive the rotation angle from all the information that we have already. So we do, so now back in the component, or back in the JavaScript, back in the class definition, we have rotation angle. And we can just return. So it's the index. Is the index sent to the component? Yes. So we return the index times 360 divided by the length of the data as a whole. Does that sound right?
Yep. Let's see.
Okay.
Yep.
We did
There
it.
it is.
There it is.
455.
455. So now the problem. So there's a slightly more subtle problem. So there are two
Doesn't mean
problems.
anything, but that's what we're going to do next week. We're going to figure out how to actually give each of these a different start.
Correct. So even these people. So again, now the wedge, every single wedge contains the complete gradient from light green to dark purple. Like it contains the complete gradient. So the rotation is correct.
We're going to slice the gradient.
Correct. We're going to take advantage of the D3 scale to slice the gradient so that it shows, like on the old version, it carries more semantic meaning.
Yeah, it might have, I don't remember if it involves masking, but we might need to just have it all live there, and then paint it over with white or something.
No, we don't have to paint anything over with white. This is where D3 shines. So the gradient.
I don't want to whitewash anything here. Get it? Yeah,
yes.
Sorry, that was my bad joke.
That's a bad joke. All right. Thanks, everyone, for coming today. Please excuse Alex. We will be disciplining him shortly for his terrible joke. And we'll be back next week, I guess. We can actually legitimately start wrapping this stuff up. So let me...
No, man.
What? We're not going to be splitting...
We still have a lot of interactivity to worry about.
Oh, no. I mean wrapping up the episode, not the project.
Oh, okay. Wow, you scared me. I was like, what? We have so much work ahead.
Oh, yeah. We're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Actually, there's...
But as always, we don't do any work behind the scenes in the actual project. We are working behind the scenes on improving the actual broadcast. So that actually, like, for example, this week we're going to try to make it so that it's possible, hopefully, to bring in people, and we'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
But we, like, the actual length, the duration of each episode is the sum total of what it took to build the project. So at the end, when we're all said and done, we have a sense of more or less how many episodes are left, but it's probably not accurate or like precise, like 100%. But everything will be a reflection of the actual amount that it took to do this kind of project. So we will be able to calculate in amount of hours how much time it took to build this project. You will have now the most perfect description of the time it takes to build a project after this is done, including digressions, which are part of normal work life.
Yes.
Yes. Because we're not machines. We just use them.
Yes, we're just regular people figuring this sort of stuff out on our own, and trying to be the best librarians we can be.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. So at this time next Tuesday, I will be doing the show Coding with the Dead, where it's the same idea. I'll be building a different Ember project, and that's being done in a much more formal manner with like tests and working with GitHub issues and using some project management software that also leverages GitHub. Last week, I spent the entire time getting the tests up and running. That was a chore because it involved writing Cucumber tests, which I haven't done in years, and then getting them to work with JavaScript, which I've never done. What's that? What?
Yeah, they're meant for Ruby. I don't know why you're using them with JavaScript.
Well, I mean, Cucumber is useful because it lets you write tests that describe user behavior, so they can be written in.
I know, but they're usually used in Ruby environments. I never heard of them being used in Cucumber environment. I mean, in JavaScript environment.
Well, so Cucumber, the software, relies on the Gherkin syntax, but like what a given and a when and a then, what those actually like mean and how you handle the kind of the variables and the tables or whatever. I mean, that's an implementation detail. You can implement that in any language.
I
Yeah.
can imagine it being implemented for JavaScript. I didn't say
Oh,
that.
you're just saying, yeah, that yes. Well, and that's how I learned about it. I learned like it doesn't really seem to be.
I just never seen it in a JavaScript environment because
Right,
JavaScript
right.
has its own testing language.
No. But I think that this is actually a valuable point. Ruby is very much designed from the ground up with. Well, let me put this delicately.
It's 5 o'clock.
I know. I'm almost done. I'm going to go really quickly here, but you're interrupting me, and that's stressing me out, etc.
I won't interrupt you anymore.
Excellent.
Not like right now. I'm not. Okay.
Ruby is taught, at least in my experience, with a focus on testing, with test-driven development and behavior-driven development. And that's how I was taught Ruby. That it seems to be the case that every to the degree that I was taught Ruby, it seems to be the case that every book I've read on Ruby is built with TDD in mind or BDD in mind, and like RSpec and Cucumber are just you just learn that stuff as you're going along. It has not been my case that JavaScript has taught that, except for Ember. And Ember doesn't, the Ember documentation doesn't, and this could be wrong. I'm sure that the React documentation or whatever is full of like, now let's test it or whatever. But Ember actually has a built-in test runner, and the documentation, if you go through the getting started, etc., the whole tutorial, you will end up writing tests. And that is great. And is also a sort of indication of the, like Ember has, as a JavaScript framework, it has a parentage that includes Ruby. Like the Yehuda and Tom came from Rails, if I'm not mistaken. Like they're familiar with Rails, etc. And Ember feels in many ways like Rails. So that's why the testing works in it. And I'm very excited on Coding with the Dead about the testing, because oh boy, is it forcing me to think about what that app is actually going to do. This app is easy. We're not doing any data entry, data validation, or anything like that. We're just the data is fixed. We're making random data here, but the data is fixed and will never change, except unless it needs to be edited. Whereas the other app, WanderText, that I'm building on Tuesdays, will be very much a data entry app. Okay, Alex, let's go. It's time to play video games. It's Friday. Alex, you're muted.
Happy weekend, everybody.
Yes, have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks for showing up, and stay cool. Ciao.